Hey, we're back. Time to talk production inventory stuff again. Welcome, episode 2. Hey, I like the way the screen's doing that. That's great. If I knew anything about video, I'd have the right name for that, right? Okay, it's episode 2, using resources, or who has money and time to burn. Before we get started with today's agenda, of importance to those of you who would like to get a job sooner rather than later, if you want to get your resume checked out, Career Services, if you're on campus, you can go up to Corbett right after class, right? And show them your resume. And they say, get ready to attend Career Connections. On February 1, those of you who are new here, Wednesday is the Engineering Career Day. You can go both days and check it out, but Wednesday is the big day for engineering. If you check this website, which you can find, just go to careerservices.nmsu, or if you don't want to write that down, just go to the NMSU homepage, click on Current Students, and click on Career Services. And they'll tell you who's coming. One of the things we've noticed of late, by the way, is because there's a cost associated with attending career fairs, some of the companies don't have career fairs. So I know this is a terrible thing to tell you, but check your NMSU email, because you'll see announcements for companies that are doing kind of info sessions. So if you want to, say, meet them one-on-one, that's one way to do it. You go to the info session. They're usually bribing with pizza and stuff like that. And yeah, you know, whatever. Okay, so in any event, get a job, pay taxes, give back to society. The mission of the IE department. All right. If you're off campus, by the way, you can still use Career Services. If you're in the region, feel free to stop by for the career fair. And even if you're not, you can use their online services. So today, we're going to define a few things. We're going to talk about some concepts. We'll give you some jargon, so when you go to the career fair, you sound knowledgeable. Oh yeah, we talked about that in class. Right? Okay, and also some special attention. I don't know what the corollary pages are in any other edition, so you'll have to do some checking. So if you have, I don't know, 6th edition, International edition, you may have to check with somebody who has the 7th edition. The reason I don't know that is I don't have one of those books, obviously, right? So, okay, today we're going to talk mostly about money and time. We talk about the concept of cost, and we say we incur a cost when we do something. Use your resources to do something. Once in a while, just to give you an example, you do the following. You go to the supermarket, you buy some stuff, right? Now, in an accounting course, they would say that you have spent some money, and now you have inventory, and at some point you'll actually eat the stuff or use the trash bags, and then you book the cost. For our purposes, that's fine, but essentially the cost is the price we pay for something. okay, whatever it is. I like to also remind people opportunity cost is important, which is you have what's called a foregone opportunity. I make a choice, I give up alternatives. Okay, for example, this morning when you got dressed, you picked something to wear. If it happens to be not the thing that makes you look best, you've incurred a cost. Okay, I make a choice, and then the next best alternative is my cost. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about opportunity costs as we go. And then when we talk about cost, we talk about fixed cost and variable cost. Fixed cost is the cost of doing something regardless of volume. For example, this class costs the same to teach whether I teach 5 people or 50. Now, I had this discussion with more than one dean. They, of course, ignored everything, but I said, at some point, the fixed costs become essentially a problem. And they said, why? And I said, at some number of people, I can no longer function with the fixed cost investment. I don't have enough oomph behind me. I need more. And they, of course, ignored that. Being deans, it's required that they not listen to anything they don't want to hear. But more seriously, the fixed cost, for example, you open up the factory in the morning, and you have the land, the building, right? All that kind of stuff. Whether you make a part or you don't, the factory is there. And if you ever wondered why you're always getting mail from DirecTV or Comcast buys commercials, one of the reasons is that they have tremendous fixed costs. And the more people they can apply their fixed costs to, the better for them. The economics of running a big network are significant. So if you want a good example of fixed costs and variable costs, think about your cell phone. The more customers they get on the network, the better, right? Because they can spread fixed costs, which they need whether they have one customer or thousands of customers, over more customers. More customers, more revenue. The fixed costs are a lower percentage, right? Make sense? What does it cost DirecTV to add you as a customer? Not much, but they can charge you, right? Or forget DirecTV or Comcast, anybody. Or like this class. Currently, this class, originally I think there was spaces for, I don't know, we said 20 grad students, okay, in the online section and 10 on campus, something like that. 30 grad students is a lot. Look around campus. At grad classes, you don't usually see that many people in them, right? of course, people start emailing me and I start doing overrides, right? Then I get an angry phone call that I have, I don't know, 40 people in a class that was stated to have 20. So I said, what is my variable cost for adding students? I got to grade one more paper, right? Deal with one more person. Most of you are relatively low resource drains. In other words, there's plenty of people who take classes who once in a while send me an email, ask a question, ask for something, and then go back to, internet world, wherever they are, and I don't hear from them till the next assignment, right? The cost of dealing with them is not very high. So it makes sense to me to add more people. More people want to take it. I said, great. I think what I have to say is pretty valuable and useful. Why wouldn't I want more people to take it, right? So I was telling someone about this, and they said, you're an idiot. And I said, why? And they said, I teach only 5 people. And I said, okay, different model, different way of doing business. When I was a grad student at a much larger university, there were several courses I took with only 5 people in it, but they were a lot of work. And the professor had a lot to do some cases, and in other cases they didn't do anything. It's hard to tell. Variable costs go with volume. So, like I add more students, what does it cost me? More time grading. More time answering emails, right? At some level, I'd have too many students, and now what do? I need a new fixed cost setting, right? I add a section with a different professor, or I say you can take it next semester or something. Just to give an example. But for example, we'll use an expression that I'll define later on. If you take your car into one of these quickie lube places, right? The cost of setting that place up generates fixed costs, right? Every time someone does an oil change, you have variable costs, right? The oil, the filter, labor, and so forth. So fixed and variable is important because the lower your fixed costs, right, potentially the more responsive you can be. You can do different things with lower fixed costs. Operate differently, as we will see. So how do we know what we're doing? We have cost reporting. We do some analysis. We also have estimates. And my favorite example of people not knowing costs is, what does it cost you to go to school? It's an interesting problem, isn't it? Tuition, books, fees, right? We have fees of various types. football tickets, golf, all those AS/NMSU fees, associated students of NMSU, in case you were wondering. What actually happens when you go to school? You have some set of costs that you know, tuition, right? Fees, they're published. When somebody emails me and says, what does it cost to get a master's from NMSU? I send them the UAR, or University Accounts Receivable page, with the tuition. And I say, multiply this number times 30, and you'll have a pretty good guess. Add $200 times 10 for textbooks. They're edging towards $200, right? Unless you're in something like nursing where they're really expensive, from what I hear. My colleagues in nursing told me that some of those textbooks are in like multiple hundreds. I said, ouch. What does it also cost you to go to school? You could be doing something else, right? You could, for example, be working. You could be like one of these characters who is, has been playing college football for a year or two, or basketball, and suddenly says, I'm making myself available for the draft, the NFL draft or the NBA draft. Instead, you say, no, finish your degree. Potentially yes, potentially no. Now, that's an opportunity cost. But what does it cost you to go to school? If you start thinking about what you thought it would cost versus what it really cost, you might get some of the problem. It gets expensive, doesn't it? You just run into all sorts of things that you couldn't possibly have forecasted, correct? And we're pretty good at this college thing. We've been doing it a long time, right? And certainly when I was going to college, they had forecasted amounts you would spend. Live in a dorm room, live in an apartment, and so forth, right? The variance between what you thought it would cost and what it actually costs can be an actual issue, or not. On the other hand, you could be a really bright undergrad, do really well, they give you a lot of scholarships, and you graduate loan-free, or not. So there's lots of different opportunities there, but if the idea of cost bugs you, just think about something like going to school. You have some set of costs, and of course, tuition has generally not done what while you were in school? Gone down. A few years ago, we did a tuition increase, and I announced that we'll have to be X% more productive. And I forget who it was said, why? I said, students are paying more. In order to keep pace, we'll have to be more productive. And they said, what? Something like take a hike, except more explicit, right? But since this is a family TV show, you never know who's watching these on the internet. There's always, like, somebody has their kid with them and they're watching one of these things. So we'll just leave it at they said take a hike. We also talk about direct and indirect costs. Direct costs standard hours from ie316. What is the labor content of this thing? What is the material used on this? Directly traceable at reasonable cost. Indirect costs, not easily allocated. What does it cost to ship stuff and receive it? If you've never heard the term receiving, the idea is when the thing arrives at the loading dock, it has to be received officially, so to speak, in the computer system. You have to warehouse it, track it, all that. Some materials. Example, you go to the car quickie lube. They do a lot of things they don't trace to the individual work order. Windshield washer fluid. Good example. They fill up your windshield washer thing, the container, and they bill you for 6 ounces of windshield washer fluid? No. They just add a percentage for that, right? Somebody with a bigger container pays the same as you do. Not realistic to allocate that directly. So we call that an indirect material. When we buy something, we talk about inventory costs. What does it cost me to acquire something? Let's pick something relatively innocent. You decide to buy, I don't know, something relatively benign, jeans or a t-shirt. You have to go get it, right? You go to the store, right? And you pay, pick out what you want, you pay for it, right? Now, this sounds almost trivial, doesn't it? What happens if they don't have it here in Las Cruces or wherever you live? What might you do next? Go on the web, right? You find it. The acquisition cost on the web's virtually zero, correct? Unless you charge yourself for your own time, just like if you go to the mall. If you were to say, I make $40 an hour, and I just spent an hour driving to the mall, my car I spent on gasoline and so forth, you would do what besides drive yourself crazy trying to do that? You would come up with the cost of acquisition. Now, pick something like a 3D prototyper or a machine tool. Acquisition costs can get quite high. Why? You have to go look at them. One time when I worked in industry, we were looking at material handling equipment, and we actually got an appointment to visit a Mack truck plant to see the equipment in action. Got in a car, drove up to Allentown, Pennsylvania, went in the plant. It was quite entertaining looking at the Mack truck plant at the time. What did they also do? pay me and my colleague to go. And they paid for the trip. That's acquisition cost. If I order it from the shop, I also have a cost. The cost of creating what's called a shop order. Then, or a purchase order if I'm purchasing something. Now, some of you, if you've hung around Dr. Vyas, you've heard muttering about the procurement card that we have. We have a deal, we get these credit cards, and we can use them to buy relatively low dollar item things, right? That's supposed to reduce the cost, right? Because then you don't have to place a purchase order, you don't do anything, you just go over, wand your card, it's tax exempt, and so forth, right? But maintaining that system costs money. So that's part of our acquisition cost. Everything costs something. Setting up the machine, if it costs, for example, somebody an hour in time to change over the machine, you just incurred a cost. If you've heard the expression single-minute exchange of dies in a previous class or somewhere, the idea behind that philosophy was in automotive plants, when the bodies were made out of steel, they had these die sets for stamping out parts, and they had to be changed over. And they used to have to shut the plant down, basically, to change that. And then philosophically, people tried to redesign the dies so that you didn't have to shut down for very long. Because the faster you can switch, the faster you're doing what? Making products that can be sold, generating cash flow. Storage. When you put stuff in storage, you accumulate cost, because the more stuff you store, the more space you need. If you need more space, you've got to pay for it. And you have all the other things that go with that. Security. If you have, for example, a store that sells TVs, computers, and so forth, Best Buy, example. If you happen to go to Best Buy, you might notice they have lots of TVs around. TVs are easily convertible if borrowed, correct? Can offer all your friends a TV by stealing them. That's not supposed to happen. So, security costs. These can be a risk. Pilferage is what happens when people take some parts home. Obsolescence or deterioration is a risk. Also known as shelf life. If you buy some number of consumer products, you'll discover little shelf life warnings on them. Expires dates. Or if you buy some cosmetic products, on the back in little print, you might see a little 12M or 6M, meaning once you open it, 6 months is it, or 12 months? That's shelf life. It deteriorates over time. Most famous, of course, would be buying milk in the supermarket. It tells you exactly the use-by date. And if you leave it around a little longer and drink it, you'll potentially discover it doesn't taste so good, right? Or if you go to some of these elitist coffee establishments, you'll discover a little clock over the pot. It'll tell you when the coffee was made. Transportation, moving stuff around from plant to plant gets expensive. Okay, one other cost that's important is the cost of a stockout, known as a back order or a lost sale. What's that? You go down to the electronics store and you want, I don't know, a 68-inch television. They don't have one. They have to order it for you, or you have to go to another store and get it. That's a lost sale or a back order. Then my personal favorite to talk about, because I teach engineering economics a lot, is capital. The cost of capital. If I borrow money to get inventory, to do things, then I have to pay for borrowing the money. So that would be your standard engineering economy problem. So if you need steel to do something, you order the steel, you have to pay for it. If you don't have cash in hand, you have to borrow it. Need supplies, you have to either have the money or borrow it. Regrettably, no one just hands you stuff for free. Doesn't work like that. You have to actually pay for it. So, any event, we talk about the cost of inventory and we say, like all of these things, sooner or later somebody had to make a model out of it, right? There's a total cost of inventory, procurement cost, and carrying cost. What's that mean, actually? The cost of getting the thing plus the cost of keeping it around. One way to think about this is, again, our friend milk and cereal problem, which is a great metaphor, actually. If you buy cereal and buy milk, right? Cereal for breakfast, what happens? You need to know something about what? About how fast you use them up, right? And as I mentioned in our last episode, one of the things you can easily do is buy way more cereal than you need. They have sales on it, right? Like something I buy every so often, Target has buy 3, get 1 free. Sounds like a great idea, right? What did I just do when I bought 3? How many boxes of this do I go through a week? Would be the obvious question. Answer, I bought a month's worth of cereal. 4 weeks, roughly. Okay, so far? Now, let's say that it cost me $9 to get the 4. All right? I needed 1, so $6 of that is what? Tied up in cereal that's sitting in my closet. I can't spend it on, for example, orange juice. Now again, this sounds like trivial, right? And you're thinking, hey, big spender, lighten the vice grip on your wallet. But my point is, this works the same for IBM and Raytheon. They have the exact same problem. And since this is a pretty diverse class, cereal and milk is a nice, easy explanation. And if you understand cereal and milk, the rest of this will make perfect sense. Right? Basically, I have $6 tied up in inventory, correct? $3 that I'm actually using up, and $6 a box, or $6 worth of cereal rather, sitting in my closet, where they're doing what? Taking up space, right? Deteriorating, right? Attracting visitors you prefer not to have in your closet, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting you're not a good house person. I'm just saying it's there, right? Attracting interest on the part of insects and that sort of thing, right? It's also taking up space that you can't put other things in. And again, GM and Ford and Raytheon have the exact same problem. See, you're not typically thinking about it that way. You're thinking in terms of, hey, for $9, I get an extra box free. And you think, brilliant, fantastic, right? You don't think about all these other things. Now, I didn't say go change the way you buy stuff, notice? Because some of this is a little trivial. But fundamentally, what this model is doing is getting you to balance the cost of buying this stuff with the cost of keeping it around, which can get quite expensive on certain products. Imagine, if you will, instead you were out buying somebody an engagement ring. The cost of keeping inventory around is pretty high for the store, isn't it? They need lots of security, correct? Diamonds and gold settings. You'd agree that that requires a whole lot more control than cereal, doesn't it? Because it's more expensive, easily pilfered, that kind of thing. Okay, so fundamentally, to leave the world of the trivial example of buying cereal, but think about it. If you buy, for example, they have a deal. If you buy 3 boxes of cereal, you get a free gallon of milk. That might not work for you, because the gallon of milk lasts what? About 4 or 5 days? So unless you really are drinking it, this might not be a deal. Okay, so graphically, I'm going to pull up a picture rather than me do this. It's actually on page 212 of the 7th edition, if I can find it. Typically, inventory cost curves look like this. And you look for an average annual cost. There's something like this. There's two curves, and you're looking for the point that gives you an optimal quantity to buy. Okay, a lot of times they look something the cost to keep it around goes up as you buy more stuff, but the cost per unit to buy it goes down. So at some point there'll be like a min total cost, is the theory. What you want to be thinking about here is the following. I need to do something. I want to do something that requires an inventory of material, parts, whatever, right? I can do what? Every time I want to do something, I could go to the store and buy all the stuff, right? That would be like doing what? Building a house. Essentially, if you got yourself a house built, the general contractor would do what? Buy all the stuff for your house, correct? Would it be in their best interest to keep a lot of inventory of, for example, wood studs and roofing shingles and stuff hanging around? No, because they have to pay for that. And it's easily delivered. If you need to prove that to yourself, just drive over to Home Depot and look at the contractor entrance, right? Or some other similar Lowe's or any of those places. But if I'm going to run a factory, I need materials, and I need tools, and I need machines to do what I do. Now, the more stuff I stock up with, what does that help me alleviate? The risk of not being able to just go get it, correct? As long as Home Depot has wood and all the lumber yards have wood, you don't have a problem, right? If you're, for example, I don't know, Cummins Diesel, they have to buy quite differently, don't they? They're making thousands of engines for Dodge. They can't just go to the steel store every time they need steel for the engine, right? They buy in quantities. When they do, they incur the cost of having it around. If it's around, it can deteriorate, It can be stolen or used on something else, as we'll see. It can become obsolete. I know it's hard to envision with steel, right? I mean, they've been making, for example, 1086 cold roll steel forever, pretty much. It's, you know, at least 120, 130 years. It's kind of hard for steel to go obsolete. On the other hand, certain exotic metals can go out of use. For example, the kinds of high temperature alloys that are used in jet engines, you can't just go buy that stuff. You have to actually order it and wait for the mill to make it in some cases. What does that do to your do something? It delays everything, right? So I use my inventory if, for example, I have a product that sells for $50, I need to do what? In general, make it for less than $50, right? Now, I know that sounds trivial, doesn't it? But I'm here to tell you there are plenty of examples of people doing the wrong thing and spending way more. And what that does is eventually put you out of business. Your investors lose their money, you lose your money, and so forth. And we also get measured by customers on what's called product availability. Now, recently, we've had a product availability problem in the on-campus sections, haven't we? You experience that when you go to register and you discover that the class is full. Anyone find that invigorating and exciting? No. Product availability is essentially interpreted in our context by service level. Every so often I get a lecture on product availability, and it's always entertaining because since I have the textbooks, I always remind people it costs more to deliver a product at that level. And then we got into a capacity discussion because someone came by and said, how come you don't have more sections of, I forget what it was, but they said, this is dumb. You get a lot of people taking that. I said, yes, I know. And they said, why won't you do that? And I said, oddly, the university is unwilling to front me the money to pay the professor. I said, if you could convince the university to hand me the money to hire the professor, and then I could find a classroom big enough, which is a problem right now because of the Jet Hall renovation, took a lot of classrooms offline, right? But some of you remember never leaving that building all day. So service level is something you all experience. The other day, my wife took her car over for service, and while she was there, she was hanging out, and she said, I was online for too long. And I said, really, why? And she said someone had a car they didn't have the oil filter for. And I said, wow, they had to call around and get one, huh? And she said, yes. And I said, and that did what? It delayed everyone who was after that car. Because you can't move the car without the oil filter in there, right? It just backs up the line. There it is, this class happening in real life. Again, service level. If you're the one they don't have the filter for, that could be annoying. And then all the people behind you. And when we talk about production, which we will shortly, we talk about two styles of production. One is called a push system. The other, more popular with undergrads and college professors and such, and consultants, is a pull system. The push system is roughly make stuff based on a forecast. Example. That would be good. What would be a good example of push? Make a whole bunch of t-shirts in various sizes, hoping that people buy them. The other day, an event occurred that generated a ton of production option changes. What was that? The Atlanta Falcons beat up on the Green Bay Packers. That happened, what, Sunday afternoon? Sunday night, you're already getting invitations to buy Atlanta Falcons stuff. Suddenly the Falcons have new fans. You can buy M&Ms with a red and white and black M&Ms with a Falcons logo jar all of a sudden. I have no idea how many people buy those things. I saw them and I said, isn't that cute? I won't be buying them. But, you know, it had nothing to do with what I think of the team, and it just looked like a waste of energy to buy that. But what would I do? I would forecast how many NFL logo things I can sell, and do what? Buy containers and chocolate and coloring and all the stuff that goes into them, right? And when I did that, what would I be doing? I would be burning money, correct? Capacity, workers, all that stuff, in hopes what? That you all would buy the candy. Well, the you all out there, right? That's called a push system. I will sell this many units. And as you can tell, if the Packers had won, you would need a different color scheme on those M&Ms, correct? So a quick changeover of your production line would be a very useful thing, wouldn't it? It would be worth paying some engineers to look at that. One time I was wondering how it is they always have hats and t-shirts for the winning team. Because I was thinking about that, and I said, even if the factory were in the stadium, they couldn't do it that fast. And then I happened to be reading something somewhere and found out they print them up for both teams in advance, and they price things in such a way that they recover it, right? And so that the stuff for the team that didn't win the NFC championship goes where? To some market that never heard of the Green Bay Packers. which I guess is increasingly small as the NFL continues to publicize itself. But certainly there's plenty of places in the world you could just get rid of these things, the hats and T-shirts and all that. Think about it, though. Like I always say, if you think that through, it drives you crazy. You start thinking about what does it cost them to do that, and how do they recover that cost. Okay, the alternative is what Toyota and many firms have gone to, which is called a pull system, in which we allocate supply based on something happening. Okay, so somebody buys a car, that triggers so many orders back. All right? That can be useful as we go through things. You'll see that. But the push system is outsmart the market. The pull system requires more efficient manufacturing. I have to be able to make things just in time, as they say. And then, of course, we wouldn't introduce you to this class without talking about lean manufacturing. The book that's been around since '96, before you were all born, right? Not exactly, but the book from 1990 appears to have introduced the term. As faculty say, the literature is beyond extensive. Whenever you hear the term that the literature is extensive, what that means is people have been writing and rewriting about it endlessly. There's any number of people that have published any number of books. And they all say a couple of basic things. They focus on, you say, duh, a la the Simpsons, because why? Because it's high quality product, low cost, on time, focus on customer value. Value is what people pay for, right? In theory. Yeah, it's a tough one. But in theory, we say we pay for value. What am I paying for that I'd rather not pay for? That could be any number of things. Example. One of the things that you guys pay for if you're a full-time student, you pay fees, is you pay for a bunch of student services that you may not use. You probably didn't even notice that, did you? Take a look at what goes into those fees, and you'll get a pretty good insight that, hey, wait a minute, I don't play golf. Or I don't go to the Aggie football games or the basketball games. Or I don't want to get into trouble with anyone, but I don't do this, I don't do that. Whatever. That's something you're paying for that you may not receive value from, correct? Now, if you could, say, go to a university that didn't charge fees, you would be probably nowhere. But on the other hand, imagine, if you will, you were buying, for example, I don't know, tires. And you discovered that in buying tires, you were also paying for some other service you didn't want. Or the tires that came were not properly manufactured. Even worse, right? That would be what? Paying for something that you'd rather not pay for. So the goal inside the plant, so to speak, the facility, is to eliminate all the things that people shouldn't pay for to reduce the costs that the customer incurs, right? Eliminate processes that do not produce high quality, eliminate inventory costs, and so forth. And people talked about lean manufacturing. Ta-da! In 5 easy steps. If you take Dr. Vyaz's class on this stuff, you get all the Muda and Mura and the 5 S's and all that jazz. Fundamentally, what's the value? How do you provide it? How do materials flow? Continuous improvement. How do you get value? Here's a good one, by the way. My favorite value question is, since I'm a college professor, I get to go to a lot of events where there are high school kids. And every so often, some kid will say, ta-da, they'll say, where does the IE department or the aerospace department or EE department rank? Which is one of the funniest questions now that I've been doing the college thing a while. Because why? It's not clear that rank has anything to do with experience. If ever there was a correlation and causation example, that would be a great one. At the #1 IE program, you might have an excellent experience or you might not. Why is that? Because the ranking has nothing to do with the experience you have. And in fact, a number 47 school might produce more value for that questioner, or number 87, or 107. Why is that? At the #1 school, they worry about different things than at number 107. They don't necessarily produce more value to students. They produce more image to people who come up with lists. In fact, there are many different versions of college ranking as a result. But if you want an example that you'd be familiar with, it would be value. In fact, some of our internet students are stationed at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, so a shout out to you if you're there watching. And Kansas State University, which has a much more well-known athletics program, happens to have an IE master's program right there. And one day when I noticed people were coming, they actually have a much bigger IE department and all that. And one day I happened to ask someone, because they said, hey, you know, K-State's right there, and you got, like, K-State goes to bowl games and all that sort of bask in reflected glory stuff. I said, what's happening? And they said, oh, well, you guys are much more accessible and easier to deal with, that person said. And I said, oh, okay, great. What does that tell you? It should tell you someone's perceiving more value from different provider, right? So how you provide value is important. The Toyota system is the famous eliminate waste system, and I'll just throw this up because it's the same stuff we'll be talking about endlessly: making too much, keeping too much around, bad quality, waiting too long, too many queues. For you fans of queuing theory, too much transportation, too much moving around. That's something you guys complain about all the time if you're on campus. I have to get to Corbett Center to do that, and I say, oh man, it's like an 8-minute walk. That's terrible. Too much processing. Often engineers call out tighter tolerances than maybe the manufacturing facility can make, and now we are doing something we might not need. Too much motion. The Toyota system's really popular. There are many examples of people using it, and we'll talk about some as we go through the semester. So the value stream is how we meet customer needs. How do we do that? Specific goods and services, information, and money. So when we think of worth, you think of the dollars you're spending. What is this worth? Typically, when people talk about value streams, they talk about the current state of a system and the future state of a system. Currently, NMSU is thinking about a value stream change that will impact undergrads. And what they're thinking about is having centralized advising, where you would go to a professional advisor as opposed to some guy like me or Dr. Valles or our friend Dr. Park or something like that, right? For undergrads. And the idea is the advisors will have a lot of data mined information about you. So they would know more than potentially. And there would be a lot of customer relations type stuff, like you'd get texts or emails that reminded you of things and all sorts of stuff like that. So when I've been hearing people discuss this, I say, oh, that's really interesting. And I just sort of try to get out of the conversation. Because I tend to think of things in terms of how do we provide value. They're thinking that somehow this is going to create a different environment for studying and going to class and things like that. I'm not particularly convinced one way or the other. I'm just thinking the thing they left out is how we deliver value to the customer, which in this case would be you guys who are undergrads. See that? They keep talking about the service without whether the service is wanted. Because one of the things I discovered in advising undergrads is most undergrads would prefer what? A, I not be around when unwanted, right? No emails saying, hey, you missed class, right? That kind of thing. You would likely to like me to have what? Infinite availability when you wanted it, right? Correct. Yeah, it's okay. I'm not going to be offended. I was an undergrad, remember? I got thrown out of more than one faculty office, a few department heads, a couple of deans. I didn't learn the first time, the second time, or the third time. So, any event, one way to think about this is who is the customer and what do they want? And then how do we gear up to provide that service? And then develop the value stream to meet what the customer wants. See, one of the things that I noticed years ago when talking about something like undergrad advising, which is easy to talk about with this, is that a lot of the things that I think you guys would find interesting, you're not interested in. Why is that? Because when I was your age, I wasn't interested either. I know this surprises you, right? You think I came this way, as I like to say. No. I was an undergrad. I did undergrad things. And when I got to be, say, 40 years old, guess what? I realized that hey, you did a lot of stupid things, self-destructive and substance abusing or, whatever, right? Think about it. If the system knows better than the customer, what does the customer get? Whatever the system wants to deliver, which may not be what they want to buy, in which case they're not going to use it. Alternatively, you could try and design, as we will talk about, a system to deliver what the customer actually wants, which would be a nice thing. Now, I don't expect anyone can read this off the computer or your handout if you have it, but this is what a value stream map might look like, where we, from the supplier through a process A, B, C, ship to the customer makes a monthly order. You deliver a weekly order to the supplier. The thing gets moved weekly. Boom, boom, boom. Just like when I was joking about building a house, you could have supplies delivered how frequently for framing a house? Drop them off in the morning, right? Need more? 5 o'clock you call, and next morning more gets delivered, right? Or you could send someone down to the lumber yard in a truck, and they could load it on the truck and bring it back, whatever. But fundamentally, this is what a value stream map would look like. And you notice across here, we have process lead time. Because as we build things, one of the things we have to do is compete on ability to have it available for the customer. If you go to Home Depot, they don't have what you want. They lose the sale, you go to Lowe's, right? For example. Now, that sounds trivial when I say it like that, right? If people do that enough, you lose a substantial amount of the market, and they tell all their friends. This is a quality problem, getting better products at store X or supplier Y. I get better computers when I buy them from X. And X gets it to me when I need it. Okay, we are out of time, and we will see you on Thursday. Have a good day, everyone.